The scorching desert sun beat down mercilessly on the military base in Afghanistan. Sergeant Mike Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he completed his morning patrol around the perimeter. The 28-year-old Marine from Texas had been stationed at this remote outpost for 8 months, and each day brought its own challenges in this harsh, unforgiving landscape. As Mike walked along the dusty path near the base's outer fence, something caught his eye in the distance. At first he thought it might be debris blown by the wind, but as he squinted against the bright sunlight he realized it was moving. Slowly, cautiously, 2 small figures were making their way across the barren ground toward the base. Mike stopped in his tracks and reached for his binoculars. Through the lenses he could see what appeared to be a dog, walking unsteadily with something small following close behind. The larger animal moved with obvious difficulty, its head hanging low and its steps uncertain. The smaller figure, which Mike now realized was a puppy, stayed close to what he assumed was its mother. The sight struck Mike immediately. Even from a distance, he could tell these animals were in terrible condition. The mother dog's ribs were visible through her matted, dirty fur, and she seemed to be struggling with each step. The tiny puppy, no bigger than a small shoe, wobbled as it tried to keep up with its mother's slow pace. Mike had always been an animal lover. Back home in Houston, he had grown up with dogs, and his family's golden retriever, Buddy, had been his best friend throughout childhood. Seeing these 2 animals in such obvious distress stirred something deep within him. He knew that in this war-torn region, stray animals often suffered terribly, struggling to find food and water in an environment that was harsh even for humans. The mother dog seemed to sense Mike's presence. She lifted her head slightly and looked in his direction. Even from afar, Mike could see the desperation in her posture. She wasn't approaching the base by accident, she was seeking help. Animals, Mike knew, had an incredible instinct for recognizing kindness in humans, and somehow this mother dog had identified the military base as a potential source of salvation for herself and her baby. Mike's heart began to race as he watched the pair continue their slow approach. Military regulations were strict about contact with local animals, primarily due to health and safety concerns. Stray animals could carry diseases, and forming attachments could become problematic for soldiers who needed to maintain focus on their mission. However, Mike also knew that many of his fellow Marines had soft spots for the animals they encountered during deployment. The mother dog stumbled slightly, and Mike instinctively took a step forward. The puppy immediately moved closer to its mother, pressing against her side as if trying to offer support. The scene was heartbreaking, a mother doing everything in her power to protect and care for her young, even while suffering herself. As the 2 animals drew closer, Mike could see more details of their condition. The mother dog's fur was not just dirty but appeared to be falling out in patches. Her eyes, though alert, were sunken, indicating severe dehydration and malnutrition. The puppy, despite its tiny size, showed the same signs of starvation. Its little belly was distended, a common sign of hunger in young animals. Mike realized he was witnessing something profound. This mother dog had somehow mustered the strength to lead her puppy across dangerous terrain to seek help from strangers. The maternal instinct driving her was so powerful that she had overcome her natural fear of humans and approached a military installation. Something that would terrify most wild animals. The base around Mike continued its normal operations. Other Marines went about their duties, vehicles moved along the roads, and the sounds of military life continued as usual. But for Mike, everything else seemed to fade into the background. His entire attention was focused on these 2 small creatures who had appeared at their doorstep, clearly in desperate need of assistance. As the mother dog and puppy finally reached the perimeter fence, they stopped. The mother looked up at Mike with eyes that seemed to communicate everything: her desperation, her hope, and her trust that he might be the answer to their prayers. The puppy, exhausted from the journey, sat down heavily beside its mother, its tiny chest rising and falling rapidly. Mike found himself at a crossroads. He could follow protocol and report the situation to his commanding officer, potentially resulting in the animals being driven away, or he could take action himself, knowing that these 2 lives hung in the balance. The mother dog continued to watch him, and in that moment Mike made a decision that would change everything. Mike looked around quickly to make sure no officers were nearby, then slowly approached the fence where the mother dog and puppy waited. As he got closer, the full extent of their suffering became heartbreakingly clear. The mother dog's bones were visible beneath her skin and her breathing was labored. The puppy, which couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, was so weak it could barely lift its head. "Hey there, girl," Mike whispered softly, crouching down near the fence. The mother dog's ears perked up slightly at the gentle tone of his voice. She didn't back away or show signs of fear, which told Mike that these animals were likely used to human contact before their circumstances became so dire. Mike reached into his cargo pocket and pulled out a protein bar from his MRE rations. He carefully unwrapped it and broke off a small piece, extending it through the fence toward the mother dog. She sniffed cautiously, then gently took the food from his hand. Her tail gave the faintest wag, the first sign of hope Mike had seen from her. The puppy, smelling the food, tried to crawl closer to its mother. Mike's heart nearly broke watching the tiny creature struggle to move. He broke off an even smaller piece of the protein bar and offered it to the puppy. The little one's tongue was barely strong enough to lick the food, but it managed to swallow the small morsel. As Mike continued feeding them tiny amounts, he noticed something that made him even more determined to help. The mother dog, despite her own desperate hunger, kept nudging pieces of food toward her puppy. Even in her weakened state, her priority was ensuring her baby ate first. This selfless act of maternal love struck Mike deeply, reminding him of his own mother's sacrifices when he was growing up. "I'm going to help you both," Mike promised quietly. Though he wasn't sure how he would accomplish this, military bases had strict protocols and he couldn't simply bring 2 stray animals inside. But looking at the mother dog's trusting eyes and the helpless puppy, Mike knew he had to find a way. The sound of approaching footsteps made Mike turn around. Corporal James Rodriguez, one of Mike's closest friends at the base, was walking toward him. Mike's stomach dropped, wondering if he was about to get in trouble for unauthorized contact with local animals. "Thompson, what are you doing over here?" Rodriguez called out. As he got closer and saw the 2 animals, his expression changed from curiosity to concern. "Oh man, look at them. They're in really bad shape." Rodriguez had grown up on a farm in California and had always been good with animals. Like Mike, he felt an immediate pull to help these suffering creatures. "How long have they been here?" he asked, kneeling down beside Mike. "They just showed up a few minutes ago," Mike explained. "The mother walked all the way here with the puppy. I think she's looking for help." He handed Rodriguez part of his protein bar. "Look how she keeps giving food to the baby first." Rodriguez watched as the mother dog again nudged food toward her puppy, and his resolve strengthened. "We can't just leave them here. They'll die if we don't do something." He looked around to make sure they weren't being observed. "I heard that Captain Martinez has been pretty understanding about situations like this. Maybe we should talk to him." Mike felt a surge of relief. Captain Martinez was known among the troops as a fair and compassionate leader. If anyone would listen to their request to help these animals, it would be him. However, Mike also knew that even the most understanding officer had to follow military regulations. The mother dog had managed to eat several small pieces of the protein bar and already seemed slightly more alert. The puppy had consumed less but was now resting against its mother instead of lying flat on the ground. These small improvements gave Mike hope that with proper care both animals could recover. "Let me get some water," Rodriguez said, standing up. They looked severely dehydrated. He jogged back toward the main building and returned a few minutes later with a large water bottle and a metal dish from the mess hall. Mike carefully poured water into the dish and pushed it through an opening in the fence. The mother dog immediately began drinking, though slowly and carefully. After she had taken several sips, she gently nudged the puppy toward the water. The tiny creature was too weak to drink on its own, so Mike dipped his finger in the water and let the puppy lick the moisture from his skin. As they worked to provide immediate aid to the animals, both Marines felt a growing sense of responsibility. These weren't just random stray animals anymore. They were 2 lives that had specifically sought out help from them. The trust the mother dog was showing by allowing them to handle her puppy was not something either soldier took lightly. "We need to make a decision," Rodriguez said quietly. "It's going to be dark soon, and temperatures drop fast out here at night. In their condition, I don't think they'll survive another night in the desert." Mike nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. He thought about the makeshift animal shelter that some troops at another base had created, and wondered if they could do something similar. He also considered the possibility of finding a local village that might take the animals in. though he wasn't sure any nearby communities had the resources to care for such sick animals. The mother dog looked up at Mike again, and he saw something in her eyes that convinced him they were running out of time. She had used her last reserves of strength to bring her puppy to safety, and now their survival depended entirely on the kindness of these two Marines who had stumbled upon them at their most desperate moment. Mike and Rodriguez exchanged a meaningful look, both understanding that they had reached a point of no return. The mother dog and her puppy needed immediate medical attention and shelter, and waiting for official approval might mean losing precious time that these animals didn't have. "I'm going to find Captain Martinez," Mike decided. "Will you stay here with them?" Rodriguez nodded, settling down near the fence to keep watch over the two animals. Mike made his way across the base toward the command building, his mind racing as he prepared what he would say. Captain Martinez was in his office reviewing reports when Mike knocked on the doorframe. "Sir, I need to speak with you about something urgent," Mike began, standing at attention. Captain Martinez looked up from his paperwork. He was a seasoned officer in his early 40s who had served multiple deployments and had seen almost everything the military could throw at him. "What's on your mind, Sergeant Thompson?" Mike took a deep breath and explained the situation, describing how the mother dog had approached the base with her dying puppy and how both animals were clearly starving and dehydrated. He spoke about the mother's obvious desperation and her trust in seeking help from humans. Captain Martinez listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When Mike finished, the captain was quiet for a moment. "Show me," he said simply, standing up from his desk. The three men walked back to the perimeter fence where Rodriguez was still watching over the animals. The mother dog had managed to drink more water and seemed slightly stronger, but the puppy remained critically weak. Captain Martinez crouched down and observed the pair for several minutes. "The mother's protecting the puppy," he noted, watching as the dog positioned herself between the humans and her baby. "That's a good sign. Means she still has fight in her." He studied the puppy, who was now breathing more regularly but still couldn't stand on its own. Captain Martinez had grown up on a ranch in Montana and understood animals well. He could see that while both creatures were in serious condition, they weren't beyond help if they received immediate care. He also recognized something else, the profound bond between the mother and puppy, and the trust they were showing by approaching the base for help. "Here's what we're going to do," Captain Martinez said, making a decision that would surprise both Marines. "We're going to create a temporary medical area in the old storage shed behind the motor pool. It's isolated enough that we won't have issues with other personnel, but close enough that you can monitor them regularly." Mike felt a surge of relief and gratitude. "Sir, I want to take full responsibility for their care. I'll use my own supplies and handle everything during my off-duty hours. Rodriguez and I will help too," Rodriguez added quickly. "We can set up shifts to make sure they're watched around the clock." Captain Martinez nodded approvingly. "I'll speak with Medic Harrison about what supplies we might need. He's treated injured animals before during his deployment in Iraq." He paused, looking at both Marines seriously. "This stays between us for now. If these animals recover, we'll need to figure out a long-term solution. But first, let's focus on keeping them alive." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. While Rodriguez continued monitoring the animals, Mike and Captain Martinez gathered supplies. They found old blankets, set up a heat source in the storage shed, and collected basic medical supplies that could be safely used on animals. Medic Harrison, a soft-spoken man from Vermont, was immediately willing to help when he learned about the situation. "Dehydration and malnutrition," he diagnosed after examining the animals through the fence. "The puppy is in critical condition, but if we can get fluids into both of them and start feeding them properly, they should have a good chance." Moving the animals into the makeshift shelter required careful planning. The mother dog was weak but able to walk slowly with assistance. The puppy had to be carried, which meant gaining the mother's trust completely. Mike spent nearly an hour sitting by the fence, letting the mother dog sniff his hands and get comfortable with his presence. When it came time to pick up the puppy, the mother dog watched anxiously but didn't try to stop Mike. This level of trust amazed everyone present. It was as if she understood that these humans were trying to help her baby, not harm it. The storage shed had been transformed into a clean, warm space with soft bedding and easy access to food and water. As soon as the mother dog was inside, she immediately went to check on her puppy, who Mike had gently placed on a thick blanket. The hard work starts now, Medic Harrison explained as he prepared a feeding schedule. They need small amounts of food every few hours, and we need to monitor their vital signs constantly. The puppy especially, young animals can go downhill very quickly, but they can also recover faster than adults if we get the treatment right. Mike volunteered to take the first watch, settling into a chair beside the makeshift animal hospital. As the sun set over the Afghan desert, he watched the mother dog curl up next to her puppy, finally able to rest in safety for the first time in what had probably been days or weeks. The mother dog looked up at Mike one more time before closing her eyes, and in that glance he saw something that made all the risk and effort worthwhile: gratitude. This brave mother had fought to save her baby's life, and now a team of U.S. Marines was fighting alongside her. The first night was touch and go. Mike barely slept as he monitored both animals every hour, checking their breathing and offering small amounts of water. The puppy's condition remained critical. Its tiny body was fighting to recover from severe malnutrition, and several times during the night, Mike worried they might lose the little one. Around 3 a.m., the puppy's breathing became irregular and shallow. Mike immediately woke Medic Harrison, who rushed to the shelter with additional supplies. "We need to get more fluids into him," Harrison said, preparing a syringe with electrolyte solution. "Hold him steady while I give him some drops." The mother dog seemed to sense the urgency of the situation. Instead of being protective or anxious about humans handling her puppy, she moved closer and began gently licking the tiny creature's face, as if encouraging it to keep fighting. Her maternal instincts told her that these humans were trying to save her baby, and she was doing everything she could to help. "Come on, little guy," Mike whispered, as Harrison carefully administered the fluids. "Your mama brought you all this way. Don't give up now." The puppy's breathing gradually stabilized, and both men felt a wave of relief. By morning, there were encouraging signs of improvement. The mother dog was able to stand and walk around the small space, and she had eaten several small meals throughout the night. More importantly, the puppy had managed to nurse from its mother for the first time since they had arrived at the base. Rodriguez arrived for his shift with good news. "Captain Martinez spoke with the base veterinarian over the radio," he reported. "She's stationed about 50 miles from here, but she's going to try to get here sometime this week to check on them properly." Word about the rescue had begun to spread quietly among the Marines at the base. Throughout the day, soldiers stopped by the storage shed to check on the animals and offer assistance. Sergeant Williams donated a soft towel from his personal supplies. Private Johnson contributed a can of chicken from his care package. Corporal Davis, who had grown up on a farm, shared his knowledge about caring for newborn animals. "I've never seen anything like this," Rodriguez commented as they watched the steady stream of Marines bringing small gifts for the animals. "These guys are some of the toughest soldiers I know, but they're all going soft for a starving dog and her puppy." Mike understood exactly why his fellow Marines were so moved by the situation. Being deployed far from home, often in harsh and dangerous conditions, sometimes made them feel disconnected from the gentler aspects of life. Caring for these helpless animals reminded them of their own capacity for kindness and gave them a chance to nurture life instead of being surrounded by conflict. The mother dog, whom the Marines had started calling Mama, began showing more personality as her strength returned. She was clearly intelligent and had probably been someone's pet before becoming lost or abandoned. She learned quickly that the humans in military uniforms were her friends and protectors. The puppy, now nicknamed Trooper by the Marines, was making slower but steady progress. He was able to lift his head for longer periods and had started making small sounds when he was hungry. Watching him struggle to grow stronger became a source of inspiration for everyone involved in his care. On the third day, something remarkable happened. As Mike was sitting in the shed reading a letter from home, Trooper managed to stand up on his own for the first time. The tiny puppy wobbled and fell after just a few seconds, but Mama immediately went to him and began washing his face with obvious pride and encouragement. "Did you see that?" Mike called out excitedly to Rodriguez, who was checking supplies nearby. He stood up by himself. Both Marines felt as though they had witnessed a major victory. After seeing Trooper barely clinging to life just days earlier, every small milestone felt like a triumph. Captain Martinez visited the makeshift animal hospital that evening and was pleased with the progress both animals were making. "You've done good work here," he told Mike and Rodriguez. But we need to start thinking about what happens next. We can't keep them here indefinitely. This was the question that had been weighing on everyone's minds. The animals were recovering well, but they couldn't remain at a military base permanently. Local Afghan villages were struggling to care for their own animals, and finding homes for strays was nearly impossible in the war-torn region. "I've been thinking about that, sir," Mike said carefully. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'd like to arrange to bring them back to the United States when my deployment ends. My family has a big yard and they've always loved dogs." Captain Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Sergeant, do you have any idea how complicated it is to transport animals internationally from a war zone? The paperwork alone would be a nightmare, not to mention the cost and logistics." Mike had spent his off-duty time researching exactly that question. "I know it's difficult, sir, but there are organizations that help military personnel bring animals home from deployment. I'm willing to cover all the costs and handle all the paperwork myself." The captain was quiet for a moment, watching as Mama gently nudged Trooper toward his food bowl. "If you're serious about this, Thompson, I won't stand in your way. But understand that you're taking on a huge responsibility, and there's no guarantee it will work out." Mike looked at the two animals who had changed his entire perspective on his deployment. "Sir, they risked everything to find help. The least I can do is risk everything to help them." As if sensing the conversation was about her future, Mama looked up at Mike with those trusting eyes that had first captured his heart, and he knew he would do whatever it took to keep his promise to her. Over the following weeks, Mama and Trooper's recovery became the talk of the entire base. What had started as a quiet rescue mission involving just a few Marines had evolved into a base-wide effort to help the two animals thrive. The makeshift animal hospital had been expanded and improved, with Marines contributing everything from toys made from spare materials to a proper feeding schedule posted on the wall. Trooper had grown stronger each day and was now able to run around the small space, playing with a rope toy that Sergeant Williams had fashioned from parachute cord. His playful energy was infectious, and Marines would often stop by just to watch him tumble around with his newfound strength. Mama had regained much of her health and had become the unofficial base mascot, greeting familiar Marines with tail wags and even learning to respond to basic commands. The base veterinarian, Captain Sarah Chen, had finally been able to visit and was amazed by the recovery both animals had made. "I've seen professional animal hospitals with worse outcomes," she told Mike after completing a thorough examination. "You've done an incredible job caring for them. Both animals are now healthy enough to begin the process for international transport, if that's still your plan." Captain Chen's visit marked the beginning of what Mike would later describe as the most complicated paperwork mission of his military career. Bringing animals from Afghanistan to the United States required health certificates, vaccination records, quarantine arrangements, and approval from multiple government agencies in both countries. Mike spent every free moment filling out forms, making phone calls, and coordinating with animal transport organizations. He contacted Nosad Dogs, a charity specifically dedicated to helping military personnel bring animals home from war zones. The organization's founder, a British Marine veteran, understood exactly what Mike was going through and offered to help navigate the complex process. "The hardest part is usually finding transport," explained Lisa, a volunteer coordinator with Nosad Dogs during one of their phone calls. "Getting animals from remote military bases to international airports is often more challenging than the international flight itself." Mike's family back in Houston had been following the story through his letters and emails home. His mother, Patricia Thompson, had already begun preparing for the arrival of two new family members. "Your father is building a doghouse in the backyard," she wrote in one letter. "He says it's the least he can do for two heroes who brought so much joy to our son during his deployment." The support from Mike's family meant everything to him, but he knew the most challenging part of the process was still ahead. Military deployments had strict timelines, and Mike's tour of duty was scheduled to end in just 2 months. If the paperwork wasn't completed and transport arrangements weren't finalized by then, Mama and Trooper would be left behind. As word of Mike's rescue efforts spread beyond the base, the story began attracting attention from military support groups and animal welfare organizations. A reporter from a military news website contacted Mike for an interview, and the story of the starving mother dog and puppy who had sought help from Marines resonated with readers around the world. The increased attention brought both opportunities and complications. Several organizations offered to help with funding for the transport, which was a huge relief given that Mike was planning to pay for everything himself on a soldier's salary. However, the publicity also meant increased scrutiny from military officials who wanted to ensure that proper protocols were being followed. "Thompson, you've managed to turn a simple animal rescue into an international incident," Captain Martinez joked during one of their meetings. "I've had calls from 3 different animal rights groups and a documentary filmmaker wanting to visit the base." Despite the complications, Captain Martinez remained supportive of Mike's efforts. He had watched how caring for Mama and Trooper had positively affected morale throughout the base, and he understood the deep bond that had formed between Mike and the animals he had saved. The breakthrough came when a cargo transport company that regularly flew supplies between Afghanistan and the United States offered to donate space on one of their flights for Mama and Trooper. The company's owner was a veteran himself and had been moved by the story when it appeared in a military newsletter. "All we need now is final health clearance and completion of the import permits," Mike explained to Rodriguez during one of their evening visits to see the animals. "If everything goes according to plan, they could be flying to Houston just a week before I'm scheduled to come home." Trooper, now a healthy and energetic puppy, was playing with a ball that one of the Marines had carved from wood. Mama watched her son proudly, occasionally joining in the play but mostly content to observe from her comfortable spot on a pile of blankets donated by the base personnel. "It's hard to believe they're the same animals that showed up here dying just a few weeks ago," Rodriguez observed. "Look at them now. They're happy and healthy and full of life." Mike nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction as he watched the 2 animals he had helped save. But he also felt a growing anxiety about the final steps of the process. Despite all the progress they had made, he knew that bureaucratic delays or medical complications could still derail the entire plan. The animals had already overcome so much, and Mike was determined not to let them down when they were so close to safety. Mama seemed to sense Mike's concern and padded over to where he was sitting, placing her head on his knee in a gesture of comfort that had become their daily routine. In that moment, Mike realized that while he had saved these animals, they had also saved something in him, reminding him of the importance of compassion and hope even in the most challenging circumstances. With just 3 weeks remaining before Mike's scheduled departure from Afghanistan, the final preparations for Mama and Trooper's journey were entering a critical phase. The animals had passed all their medical examinations, received their required vaccinations, and the necessary paperwork was nearly complete. However, unexpected challenges continued to arise that tested everyone's determination. The first setback came when the original cargo transport company had to cancel their donated flight due to mechanical issues with their aircraft. Mike felt his heart sink when he received the news, knowing that finding alternative transport on such short notice would be extremely difficult and expensive. "Don't panic yet," advised Lisa from Nowzad Dogs during their emergency phone call. "We've dealt with situations like this before. Let me make some calls and see what other options might be available." While waiting for news about alternative transport, Mike spent extra time with Mama and Trooper, trying not to think about the possibility that his rescue mission might fail at the last moment. The animals seemed to sense his stress and stayed close to him during his visits, with Trooper often falling asleep in Mike's lap and Mama resting her head against his arm. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Colonel Jennifer Hayes, the base commander who had been quietly following the rescue story, received a call from a military transport pilot she knew from previous deployments. Captain Rebecca Torres flew medical evacuation missions and had heard about Mike's situation through military networks. "I've got a medical transport flight heading to Germany next week," Captain Torres explained during a conference call with Colonel Hayes and Mike. "From there, I know a civilian pilot who regularly flies rescue animals to the United States. If we can coordinate the timing, we might be able to get your animals home." This new plan was more complex than the original arrangement, requiring precise timing and coordination between military and civilian transport. Mama and Trooper would need to fly first to Germany, spend a brief layover in quarantine facilities there, then continue on to Houston. The logistics were complicated, but it was their best remaining option. Mike immediately began working with German animal import authorities to arrange the necessary permits for the layover. The process required him to prove that the animals would only be in Germany temporarily and had final destinations in the United States. Language barriers and time zone differences made every phone call and email a challenge. Meanwhile, the entire base rallied around the effort to ensure Mama and Trooper were ready for their journey. Marines contributed to a fund to help cover unexpected expenses, and several soldiers with experience in animal care volunteered to help with final preparations. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, who had worked with military working dogs, helped Mike create a detailed care package for the animal's journey. Long flights are stressful for animals, she explained as they assembled comfort items, familiar blankets, and special foods. Having familiar scents and objects will help them stay calm during transport. The animals themselves seemed to understand that something significant was happening. Mama had always been intuitive about human emotions, and she appeared more alert and attentive as the activity around their shelter increased. Trooper, now a healthy and energetic young dog, continued to play and explore, but he stayed closer to his mother and to Mike than usual. 3 days before the scheduled transport, Captain Chen returned to the base for a final health inspection of both animals. Everything needed to be perfect for international transport. Any sign of illness or stress could result in the animals being denied boarding. They're both in excellent health, Captain Chen announced after completing her examination. Mom has gained back all the weight she lost, and Trooper is developing exactly as he should for a dog his age. From a medical standpoint, they're ready to travel. The night before transport, Mike spent several hours in the shelter with Mama and Trooper, reflecting on the incredible journey they had all shared. Just a few months earlier, these animals had been dying in the desert, and now they were healthy, happy, and about to begin new lives in America. I don't know if you understand what's happening tomorrow, Mike said quietly to Mama as she rested beside him, but I promise you're going to love your new home. My family is already excited to meet you both. Rodriguez and several other Marines who had been involved in the rescue came by that evening to say goodbye to the animals. Each soldier had formed their own bond with Mama and Trooper, and the farewell was emotional for everyone involved. You saved their lives, Rodriguez told Mike as they watched Trooper play with his favorite rope toy one last time. But I think they saved something in all of us too. This whole experience reminded us why we're fighting over here, to protect innocent lives and give hope to those who need it most. Early the next morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise over the Afghan desert, Mike loaded Mama and Trooper into specially designed transport carriers. The carriers were equipped with comfortable bedding, food, and water, and had clear panels so the animals could see out during their journey. Mama looked anxious as she was placed in her carrier, but she seemed to understand that Mike was still taking care of her. Trooper, more excited than nervous, wagged his tail as he explored his travel space. Both animals had identification tags with Mike's contact information and their destination address in Houston. As the transport vehicle prepared to leave for the airfield, Mike knelt down beside the carriers for one final goodbye. I'll see you both in Texas in just a few days, he promised. Be brave and remember that you're going home. Captain Torres assured Mike that she would personally oversee the first leg of the journey and coordinate carefully with the civilian pilot in Germany. As the vehicle drove away from the base, Mike felt a mixture of pride, anxiety, and hope, knowing that the most critical phase of the rescue mission was just beginning. The next 72 hours were the longest of Mike's military career. While continuing his final duties at the base, he constantly checked his phone for updates about Mama and Trooper's journey. Captain Torres sent regular messages from the flight to Germany, reporting that both animals were handling the travel well, and that Trooper had even managed to sleep for most of the journey. The layover in Germany went smoothly, thanks to the excellent facilities at the Frankfurt Animal Transit Center. The German veterinary staff examined both animals and confirmed they were in good health and ready for the final leg of their journey to Houston. Photos sent by the transit center showed Mama looking alert but calm, while Trooper appeared curious about his new surroundings. Captain Hans Muller, the civilian pilot who had volunteered to fly the animals to Houston, was an experienced animal transport specialist who had helped reunite hundreds of military personnel with animals they had rescued during deployment. These two are special, he messaged Mike after meeting Mama and Trooper. You can tell they've been through something difficult, but they have such strong spirits. They're going to do great in America. Back at the base, Mike's fellow Marines were almost as anxious as he was about the animals' safe arrival. Rodriguez had been tracking the flights online and provided regular updates to anyone who asked. They should be landing in Houston in about 6 hours, he announced during lunch on the third day. Mike's parents had driven to Houston's Bush Intercontinental Airport and were waiting in the cargo terminal when the plane carrying Mama and Trooper finally touched down on American soil. Patricia Thompson later described the moment as one of the most emotional experiences of her life. When they brought out those carriers, and we could see the animals our son had saved, we both started crying, she wrote in an email to Mike. Mama looked tired but alert, and the moment we spoke to her, her tail started wagging. Trooper was more energetic. He was looking around at everything with such curiosity. We could immediately see why you fell in love with them. The Thompson family had prepared extensively for the animals' arrival. Mike's father, Robert, had built a large, comfortable doghouse in their backyard and had installed a fence to create a safe space for the animals to adjust to their new environment. Patricia had researched the best foods for dogs recovering from malnutrition and had stocked up on toys and comfort items. The first few days in Houston were an adjustment period for everyone. Mama was cautious about her new surroundings but gradually began to relax as she realized she was safe and cared for. Trooper, with the adaptability of youth, quickly embraced his new life and began exploring every corner of the Thompson family's large backyard. Mama is incredibly intelligent, Patricia reported in her daily emails to Mike. She seems to understand that we're your family, and she's appointed herself as our protector. Trooper follows her lead in everything. It's clear she's been an amazing mother to him. Mike's deployment ended just 5 days after Mama and Trooper arrived in Houston, and his homecoming was unlike any he could have imagined. When he walked into his family's backyard, Mama immediately recognized him and ran across the yard to greet him, her tail wagging furiously. Trooper, who had been just a tiny, dying puppy when Mike first found him, was now a healthy young dog who bounded over to join the reunion. I can't believe this is the same puppy who could barely lift his head, Mike said, kneeling down as Trooper jumped into his arms. Look how big and strong you've gotten. Mama pressed against Mike's side, and for several minutes, the three of them simply enjoyed being reunited after their incredible journey. The story of Mike's rescue of Mama and Trooper had continued to spread during his final weeks of deployment. Local news stations in Houston covered their arrival, and the story was picked up by national media outlets. Military support organizations began using their story as an example of the compassion and dedication shown by American service members around the world. It started with just wanting to help 2 animals who were suffering, Mike told a reporter during an interview a few weeks after his return, but it became something much bigger. It showed me that even in the darkest situations, there's always room for hope and kindness. Mama and Trooper adapted beautifully to their new lives in Texas. Mama became a beloved neighborhood dog, known for her gentle nature and intelligence. Trooper grew into a strong, playful companion who seemed to retain no memory of his difficult early days. Both animals brought joy not only to the Thompson family, but to everyone who heard their story. Years later, Mike would often reflect on that day when a starving mother dog had approached the fence of a military base in Afghanistan, seeking help for herself and her dying puppy. The trust she had shown in that moment had changed all their lives in ways none of them could have predicted. The bond between Mike and his rescued dogs remained unbreakable. Mama lived to be an old dog, spending her golden years comfortable and loved in the Texas sunshine. Trooper grew into a loyal companion who accompanied Mike on camping trips and adventures throughout the Southwest. Both animals had not only survived their desperate beginning but had thrived beyond anyone's expectations. The rescue mission that had started with 2 Marines sharing their rations with starving animals had become a testament to the power of compassion and determination. Mike's simple act of kindness had created ripple effects that touched hundreds of lives and reminded people around the world that heroes come in all forms, including a brave mother dog who refused to give up on her baby and a soldier who refused to give up on both of them.